The studio lights shone brightly as the audience cheered for the night's special guest, Elon Musk. Dressed casually in a black t-shirt and blazer, Musk settled into his chair, ready for what was expected to be another engaging conversation about technology, space, and the future of AI. The host, a well-known entertainer, leaned in with a smile. Elon, you've built rockets, revolutionized electric cars, and even talked about colonizing Mars. But tonight, I want to ask you something different. Have you ever been personally moved by someone's story? Musk's usual confident demeanor softened. He paused for a moment, then said, "Yes? And actually, there's someone here tonight I'd like to talk about." The room fell silent. This wasn't part of the planned segment. Even the host seemed caught off guard. Elon gestured toward the side of the stage. "Can we bring Mark Addy out?" A man in his early 50s walked hesitantly onto the stage. His clothes were neat but worn, his expression uncertain. The audience clapped politely, though many exchanged curious glances. The host turned toward him. "Mark, welcome. Can you tell us a little about yourself?" Mark took a deep breath. My name is Mark Addy. I was an aerospace engineer for nearly 25 years, helped design components for early space shuttle missions, but life doesn't always go as planned." He hesitated, his voice breaking slightly. "My wife passed away 5 years ago. Medical bills drained everything we had. I lost my home, my job. I've been trying to get back into the industry, but no one gives second chances at my age." The audience fell completely silent. Even the host, known for quick comebacks, seemed at a loss for words. Elon, however, reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Mark, you and I met a few months ago at a Tesla event, didn't we?" Mark nodded, eyes misty. "I didn't think you'd remember." Elon handed him the paper. "This is a job offer. Effective immediately, you'll be joining SpaceX as a senior aerospace consultant. Your experience is invaluable, and we need people like you." Gasps filled the studio. The host blinked in disbelief. The audience erupted into cheers. Mark, hands trembling, looked at the paper. I don't know what to say." Elon smiled. "Just say yes." Tears welled up in Mark's eyes. He nodded, overcome with emotion. The crowd gave a standing ovation as the cameras captured the moment, one that would soon be seen by millions around the world. That night, social media exploded with the clip. News outlets ran headlines about the unexpected act of kindness. But for Mark Addy, it wasn't about headlines. It was about getting his life back. And for everyone watching, it was a reminder that sometimes all someone needs is a second chance. And sometimes kindness comes from the most unexpected places, even from a billionaire on live television. The moment Elon Musk handed Mark Addy that job offer, the world watched in awe. The clip went viral within hours, millions of views, countless shares, and an outpouring of emotion from people around the globe. News anchors called it the most touching moment of live television in years. Twitter, Instagram, and news outlets were flooded with headlines. Elon Musk changes a man's life on live TV. A second chance, Mark Addy's journey from struggle to SpaceX. Sometimes, billionaires do the right thing. But for Mark, it wasn't just a headline. It was real. The morning after the show aired, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Dad, have you seen the news?" His daughter's voice trembled with excitement. "I have," he said, still in disbelief. "I can't believe this is happening." But it was. A few hours later, he received an official email from SpaceX, confirming his position and welcoming him to the team. They had already arranged his flight to Hawthorne, California, where SpaceX's headquarters was located. It wasn't just a job. It was a new beginning. Day 1 at SpaceX. When Mark stepped onto the SpaceX campus, He felt like he had traveled through time. It had been years since he worked in the aerospace industry, and technology had advanced at an unimaginable speed. Rockets that could land themselves, spacecraft designed for Mars missions. It was overwhelming, but thrilling. He was greeted at the entrance by a company representative. "Mr. Addy, welcome to SpaceX. We're honored to have you." Mark swallowed hard. "It's been a long time since I worked in a place like this. I hope I can keep up." The rep smiled. "Mr. Musk wouldn't have given you this job if he didn't believe in you." Those words gave Mark a newfound confidence. Later that day, Mark was taken to a high-level engineering meeting. When he walked in, a dozen young engineers, some no older than 30, turned to look at him. He could feel their curiosity. Elon Musk himself was at the head of the table. "Mark," he said, nodding, "take a seat." Mark sat down, his palms slightly sweaty. He had spent years feeling invisible, irrelevant, and now he was sitting at a table with some of the brightest minds in aerospace. Elon gestured toward a massive display screen. "We're finalizing the thermal shielding for Starship's re-entry. You worked on early shuttle materials. What do you think?" Mark blinked. He had assumed he would start with simple tasks, reviewing reports, maybe overseeing logistics. But this? They wanted his opinion on a Mars-bound spacecraft. He leaned forward, studying the data. The numbers, the calculations, the stress tolerances. It all made sense to him, even after all these years. He cleared his throat. "I'd say you're 90% there, but..." He pointed at a specific heat-resistant alloy. "This could be a weak point during extreme re-entry conditions. We had a similar issue on the shuttle program in the early days. A minor adjustment in the layering process could fix it." Silence. Then one of the younger engineers murmured, "That actually makes sense." Another nodded. "We should run a simulation with that adjustment." Elon grinned. "You still got it, Mark." Mark felt a lump in his throat. He did still have it. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving. He was making a difference again. Over the next few weeks, Mark became more than just an employee. He became a mentor. Engineers who had only read about past space missions were now learning directly from someone who had lived through them. "You worked on the shuttle program?" one young engineer asked him. Mark nodded. "I was there when we made mistakes. And I was there when we fixed them. That's how we learn." And he wasn't just helping SpaceX. SpaceX was helping him. His salary allowed him to move into a comfortable apartment in Los Angeles, close to his daughter. He no longer had to worry about affording groceries or medical bills. Most importantly, he had found his purpose again. One evening, after another long but fulfilling day at SpaceX, Mark sat at his kitchen table and opened his laptop. He had been thinking about this for weeks. He started typing, "Dear Mr. Musk, I don't know if you realize just how much that moment on live television changed my life. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me back my dignity, my confidence, and my belief in myself. For years, I felt forgotten. Like my best days were behind me. Like I was nothing more than a footnote in aerospace history. But now, because of you, I get to do what I love again. I get to teach, to create, to help shape the future of space travel. So, thank you. Not just for the opportunity, but for seeing me when no one else did. Sincerely, Mark Addy." He hesitated for a moment, then pressed send. The next morning, Mark arrived at work to find a short email waiting for him. From Elon Musk, subject. "RE, thank you. Mark, you don't owe me thanks. The world should be thanking you for what you've done, and what you're still going to do. Now, let's get back to work. Mars isn't going to colonize itself." Mark chuckled. For the first time in years, He couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. Months passed, and Mark Addy was no longer the newcomer at SpaceX. He was a key player. His experience helped the team refine the thermal shielding on Starship, ensuring it could withstand the extreme heat of re-entry. Engineers half his age often sought his advice, and he had even begun leading his own small research group. But the biggest surprise came one evening when he was called into an unscheduled meeting. "Elon wants to see you," his supervisor said, his tone unreadable. Mark hesitated. In his experience, an unexpected meeting with the CEO could mean anything. He took a deep breath and made his way to the executive wing of the building. Inside, Elon Musk was seated at a conference table, scrolling through some documents. When Mark walked in, he looked up and grinned. "Mark," he said, gesturing for him to sit. "How would you feel about working on something bigger?" Mark raised an eyebrow. "Bigger than Mars?" Elon chuckled. "Number, but something just as important. You know we're sending the first civilian crew on a Starship mission next year?" Mark nodded. The Dear Moon project was a highly publicized trip around the moon, funded by a billionaire entrepreneur. "Well, after that," Elon continued, "we're preparing a fully operational test flight, one where the crew will spend an extended period in space to simulate future Mars missions." Mark leaned forward, intrigued. "We need experienced engineers up there," Elon said. "People who can troubleshoot in real time, who've worked on the technology firsthand, who understand space travel not just from theory, but from practice." Mark's heart started pounding. Was this leading where he thought it was? Elon folded his hands on the table. "How would you feel about going to space, Mark?" For a moment, the room fell silent. Mark had spent his entire life building spacecraft, testing designs, solving problems, but he had never once imagined he'd be the one inside one of them. "Me?" he finally said, almost in disbelief. Elon nodded. "You?" Mark let out a breath. "I mean, I'd have to think about it." Elon smirked. "Of course. It's not like I'm asking you to take a weekend trip to Vegas. But think about it. You've already proven yourself invaluable down here. Now, I think you'd be even more valuable up there." A life-changing decision. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. The idea of going to space had never been in his plans. He was an engineer, not an astronaut. But then he thought about his journey, the years of struggling, the moment on live TV, the way his life had changed because of one act of kindness. Now, he had a chance to be part of history in a way he never imagined. The next morning, he walked into Elon's office. "I'm in," he said. Elon grinned. "Good. Let's get you to training." Preparing for the stars. Mark's life shifted overnight. Suddenly, he was in an astronaut training program, undergoing rigorous physical and mental tests. He trained in zero-gravity simulations, spent hours in spacecraft mock-ups, and studied survival techniques in case of an emergency landing. It was exhausting, grueling. At times, he wondered if he was too old for this. But every time he doubted himself, he remembered something Elon had told him months ago. "The world should be thanking you for what you've done, and what you're still going to do." Mark wasn't just going to space. He was proving that second chances could lead to extraordinary things. The launch 1 year later, the world watched as a massive Starship stood ready on the launch pad. The mission was historic. The first long-duration civilian crewed flight, paving the way for humanity's future beyond Earth. And among the crew was Mark Addy, the engineer who had once thought his best days were behind him. As the countdown began, Mark looked out the window at the world below. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. As the engines roared to life and the spacecraft surged toward the stars, Mark smiled. This wasn't just a new chapter. This was his next mission. As Starship broke free from Earth's gravity, Mark felt the weight of his past fall away. The hardships, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they all seemed so small now. Floating in microgravity, he looked out of the viewport. The Earth, a fragile blue marble, spun silently in the vast darkness of space. Tears welled in his eyes. Once, he had been a man searching for purpose, wondering if the world had already moved on without him. Now, he was here, among the stars. A voice crackled through his headset. It was Elon. "How does it feel, Mark?" Mark swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "Like I was always meant to be here."